All right, welcome in everybody. Tony Patelis here, the College Shoot News Podcast. I am your host. Tonight we have our second edition of the weekly recap. We just had another tremendous week of college basketball, so we're going to break it all down right now. I have a special guest tonight. Eric Fawcett is here from GatorCountry.com. He's going to join me. We have a lot to talk about. Eric, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Just before me and Tony got on, we were just talking about how much good basketball there was today and this week. And obviously, if you follow Tony, you know all the good stuff that's going on. And I'm just doing really well. And Sunday afternoon, nothing like some Sunday afternoon or late afternoon hoops talk. So yeah, life is good.
Absolutely. So Eric, what were some of your takeaways from this week? Who were maybe some teams that impressed you, and maybe some players as well?
I would say one thing that really impressed me. So obviously in the off season, I thought the whole Mitchell Robinson thing was so crazy and fascinating. And when he kind of snubbed Western Kentucky, I really felt for that team and that fan base, and I was like, oh, those poor Hilltoppers are going to be back to being I don't want to say irrelevant, but just not on the national radar. And just to see the way that they've kind of come out, and to see how well they've played this year to start the season. They played Villanova really, really tough, and I thought that they had a good shot at that Villanova game, and then they knocked off Purdue in decent fashion, and then SMU, and to see Western Kentucky go on a little bit of a tear here, I've just been really impressed, because they've been on just such a roller coaster. So to see them go from like, hey, we have this top 5 recruit, like huge news for them, to see them get snubbed by him in like weird fashion, and now to see them bounce back, it's really easy to cheer for. So and it's funny because you're talking about like what kind of players impress you. It's like I was looking at went back and watching some of their games afterwards, and it's like they have like 7 guys in their rotation essentially, and like I'm gonna look at it right now, but they only have 8 players that have dressed for games. One of them is a 4-minute a game guy. So they essentially have seven guys in their rotation, and 6 of them average in double figures. So I think that's a cool storyline, and I'll be cheering for them all the way, because I thought they got a bit of a raw deal in the whole Mitchell Robinson thing, and maybe he'll wish he was there. But that's a team that's kind of impressed me this week. And yeah, what about you? What have you been looking at this week?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of teams. Notre Dame, I thought, was really impressive in Maui. Villanova winning the battle for Atlantis. They played really well. Minnesota as well. They had a big win on the road at Providence. They had that debacle yesterday. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later. But, the team that I really was impressed with is Baylor. They were really impressive. They beat a good Wisconsin team, also a really good Creighton team who was really explosive. They held them to 59 points. Baylor just seems like they're always the forgotten team in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Kansas
Man,
always...
they get.
Go ahead,
they get the best out of their guys, like no matter what, and it just blows me away. And they play that like amoeba like zone that it just is like, no matter how prepared you feel like you are against Baylor, I feel like no one is ever comfortable playing. And I love Manuel Compton. If you have a point guard like that and you defend like that, my goodness, you're in good shape.
Right, we always forget about them, and then we look up and they win 25 games. They finish top 3 in the Big 12, and they're in the Sweet 16. I mean, every year.
Yeah, no kidding. They're one to not take too lightly.
Yeah, like you said, they have an elite point guard in Lecomte. Joe Lual-Akil is playing like a all Big 12 guy. He's really, really good up front. They have a lot of size. They play tremendous defense. They're holding teams at 59 points a game. So they've been, to me, one of the more impressive teams kind of under the radar. A couple players, Mikal Bridges from Villanova is a kid that, I didn't think he'd be this good offensively. I thought he'd be a serviceable offensive player while being one of the best perimeter defenders in the country. But, he's averaging 18 and a half. He's shooting 50% from threes, averaging almost 3 steals a game. And like I said, he's probably the best perimeter defender in the country. He can bother guards with his great length. So he's a kid that I'm really impressed with. What do you think about Villanova early this season, from what you've seen from them?
My thing with Villanova, and I think we kind of saw it with Western Kentucky in their game, is I feel like the pace that they play the game at is always going to keep them on it always kind of lets lesser teams stay in the game, and I find like it's that kind of is why it's how they kind of, not like it was a huge upset for them to lose in the NCAA tournament to a good Wisconsin team, but just if you're going to play that slow, your margin of error is small, and I wish they had I wish they had a big body at center. I still I think yeah. Go on.
Spellman is pretty darn good. They're a freshman, big there. So
that's true. Yeah, it's true. Especially as for a freshman like you mentioned. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like I love their guard play. I think they're coached so well. I just that pace scares me, and you see that in some of these lower scoring games. That is for sure.
Yeah, they don't blow your doors off, but they win. They just win, and it's pretty simple. But they don't beat themselves. They don't. They just don't make the dumb mistakes that other teams make, and that's why they always come out on top. Jay Wright is one of the best coaches in the country, as we know. So
yeah, and I guess you don't win that many Pig East in a row if you're not going to beat yourself, like you mentioned. But
yeah.
I forgot to mention one of. So I use something called Synergy. It's it's kind of scouting service also. You just use it to look back and watch all games. So anyways, I just watched this morning all the possessions of Trey Holder from Arizona State against Xavier, because that was a guy who really impressed me, and Arizona State really impressed me. So I guess while we're talking really good performances, let's look at his line. Yeah, he had 40 points. He was 14 for 22 from the field, and that's an undersized Arizona State team, but there's a lot of times they had 3 guards on the floor that were like 6'1". And they made, and I really like Xavier, so that's I don't. It was a win that over a ranked team that didn't make me think less of the ranked team. It just made me think more of Arizona State. So and maybe the Pac-12 actually looks like they could use a team like Arizona State to step up a little bit more, as some of their other teams have faltered a little bit. Watching Oregon sputter in a tournament in Portland that was honoring the Nike brand, and they fizzled out a little bit. So yeah, it looks like maybe Arizona State will pick up a bit of the slack.
Yeah, the Pac-12 is a little bit dicey right now. If Arizona State can ramp up their defense, I think they could be pretty good this year. They were just horrendous last year on defense. They have a lot of talent. They can score the basketball, but they couldn't stop anybody. So if they can do that well this play better defense this season, maybe they can get in that NCAA tournament mix. Oregon definitely was a little disappointing, obviously, at the PK 80, but I feel like that's a team that's going to take a while to get things cooking, because they have a lot of newcomers, a lot of new faces. But, I think Dana Altman is a tremendous coach, so I wouldn't be surprised if they turn things around and are in the mix for the NCAA tournament later this season.
Oh, yeah, and I know that, like, Tony, anyone that follows you knows that you are the master of not overreacting to early season games. So yeah, I know I know you always like to kind of talk people down when a loss in November, people think that's gonna somehow
just a
yeah.
Go
so
ahead, sorry.
No, yeah, I know you've got your head on straight a little more, but
yeah. I'm just a patient person, and I think with such a small sample size, you just can't overreact to teams winning and losing in November. I just think, these things happen. Even good teams play bad sometimes, and generally it happens early in the season when they're still trying to figure things out. So, I get multiple tweets a day with my team is great or my team sucks, and I just tell people, slow down. Then we'll see what happens.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Well, I have there's a player for Oregon, Abu Kebab. He's a Canadian. So a lot of people were in Canada kind of following Oregon. They obviously had the Canadians last year, but it was just funny because I had a few people tweeting at me last year of just oh, Abu should have redshirted. Like, he shouldn't have come on this. Like, he should have waited because he shouldn't have wasted a year of eligibility on this Oregon team. And I was like, yeah. Anyways, Canada's got a lot of new basketball fans, so new college basketball fans. But yeah,
Canada is churning out tremendous talent. It's incredible. They have some of the best. They've got a handful of top 10 guys coming out of high school these last few years. I think RJ Barrett's one kid who's coming out next year, correct?
Yeah, he's next year. He reclassified. Yeah, for those of you who might not know, I am Canadian. I live in Canada, so that's why I don't just that's kind of why I follow the guys. But yeah, there's a lot of really good Canadians in 2018. Obviously, especially with RJ Barrett reclassifying. There's a player named Ignas Bradzakis I really like. He's going to Michigan. There's Simi Shitu. He's the number. I'm looking at ESPN right now. He's number 6. Like he's number 7 in 24/7, depending on what you like. He's a Canadian, yeah. So the number 6 player, and he actually committed to Vanderbilt the other day, which is very interesting for those of you who might know. For Vanderbilt to land a top 10 guy is pretty cool. So yeah. So anyways, lots of Canadians in 2018, especially. That's so. I'll be continuing to watch those guys. I'm always happy to always happy to get those guys. Andrew Nemhart, he committed to Florida. He's a Canadian. Just looking at some of the other top 100 guys, but yeah, for an area, especially it's like mostly just kind of Toronto. To have an area like that, just a city producing that much talent is pretty cool for Canada, and it means a lot more attention for the sport up north. So I'm happy about that.
For sure. Absolutely. All right, so let's move on here, Eric. I wanted to talk, it's funny that, I wanted to talk about Michael Porter Jr. I know you're a big NBA guy, so, we just saw an Instagram post. You want to explain what just happened?
Oh, yeah, so it was funny because I was just taking a look at kind of what we were going to talk about today. So, and right at the same time, Michael Porter Jr. put up a picture on Instagram, and with the caption, he says, and I quote, "Just letting y'all know, whoever said it was 3 to 4 months." Oh, I have to go look at Zen. Just letting y'all know, whoever said it was going to take 3 to 4 months to recover lied, with a couple emojis of a sly face. So, yeah, maybe he thinks he's going to come back. So it was just funny. It was like 9 minutes ago. So it was just before we spoke. So that was kind of interesting because, yeah, we were already planning on talking Michael Porter Jr., obviously.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, say it does take. Let's just go the safe route here. Say he is out 3 to 4 months. He misses this season. How much do you think this affects his draft stock at all? Maybe he's not the number 1 pick. Maybe he slides down a few spots. What do you think about how the franchises and scouts will feel about this situation?
To be honest, I'm in the camp that this doesn't matter whatsoever. I don't think this affects his stock at all. I just think that in the scheme of how much they like scouts will have seen Michael Porter Jr. in his career up to this point and his career until the draft, even like his college career, even if he played, it would actually be a relatively small blimp on what he's done. He's because a guy like that's been followed for so long, going to be like being involved with USA Basketball, like Nike Hoop Summit, like he did Adidas Nations, like just all those things. And when he goes through the process of the individual workouts with teams, I think that actually plays such a big role, the individual workouts. And that's something that we don't always see as college basketball fan or as NBA fans. Obviously you're not in those workouts. So that's how sometimes you see guys shoot up the draft board. Like let's look at like a Kyle Kuzma or some guys like that kind of rocketed up and ended up being Wells because of the work they did in these individual workouts. So yeah, I just think that in the grand scheme of his sample size of basketball from the time he was about 15 to the time he goes through the workouts, I don't think there's anyone that's going to think like, oh, we just haven't quite seen enough of him. That won't be the case. So I don't think it affects his stock at all. If he happens to get drafted 3rd or 4th, I think it's more because a team really likes what they see out of Bagley or something. But I don't think it's because I don't think it's because they see Porter's stock falling at all. I guess you could also say with the caveat of if this injury he has isn't going to be a long-term kind of effect, which back injuries are a little bit scary like that. I heard people talking about how pretty like he's likely to have this be a little bit of an issue. So you could argue that would lower his draft stock, but it wouldn't be, because he didn't play college basketball and we haven't seen him against top competition. I don't think that would be the case.
Okay, now, if he's fully healthy, everything's fine, everything checks out, is he the number 1 pick in your opinion, or are you a Bagley guy or even a DeAndre Ayton guy? Who do you think is the best prospect coming out of this class?
That's a really good question. I've kind of wrestled with it myself because I think what you have is maybe the most what would the term be? In Porter, you have the guy that has perhaps the most desirable skill set as that, stretchy four that kind of a little bit more of a wing. So I would say he has the most desirable skill set. You have Bagley, who I think is perhaps the most dominating player, just physically, and he's kind of got that dog in him. But then I think you have in Ayton the most talented with the way he moves and athleticism at that size. So I think he might kind of have the most upside. So you have three players that all would bring something a little bit different. I'm probably on the side of Porter. I think his ceiling's obviously high. All of those three have super high ceilings. Yeah. But I feel like his floor is pretty low. His floor would be high. His floor would be high because he's a guy that I think if nothing else, he's a guy who could shoot the three-pointer well enough to be not a liability on offense, and he's athletic and long enough that he could be, he'll be a 3-and-D guy if nothing else at the NBA level, where, if Bagley can't quite figure it out, he might have a little bit of Jahlil Okafor to him who can't really find a home. I think, Jahlil Okafor can't rebound the ball, and Bagley can certainly rebound the ball. So I think, Bagley might have a better chance than him. If someone wanted to take Ayton first overall, I wouldn't fault him because he is just he's so smooth in his athleticism while also being so powerful. And he's, small sample size so far, but looks like he can shoot the ball a little bit, which I don't even know how much you want him shooting the ball when you've got a guy that could dominate down low so much. So there's, if the draft was tomorrow, if someone none of those picks would really surprise me. But if I'm a team, I think I'm just most tantalized by the skill set of the offensive skill set of Porter. I think guys like that are so skilled and polished, that young, are still a little bit more enticing to me than the super athletes. That's how I look at it. What about you? What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I'm not a huge NBA draft guy and scouting guy, but the kid I love, and I don't think a lot of people know him very well, is Robert Williams from Texas A&M.
Yeah,
I mean, this kid's a legit top 5 pick, and I don't think a lot of people know who he is. He was.
Oh, go on.
Go ahead. So.
Yeah, well, it's obviously a guy who I think he came off the bench a lot of time for Texas A&M, and playing behind like Tyler Davis, and they had such a weird roster kind of composition last year that also just didn't make without Texas A&M having great guard play, that that can make that can be tough for bigs. It's tough for a big to just go out there and do their thing without. So he should have every opportunity, and obviously the SEC is looking strong, so he should. People will be tuning into games a little bit more, and Texas A&M has an awesome non-conference slate, so that helps him as well. So let's that would be cool, and just add another guy to the race. And what's crazy too, as much as the NBA keeps talking about being smaller and small ball and wings and versatility, last year the top end of the draft was pretty big heavy, and this year it's pretty big heavy, and I think there's with this surge of talent of big men in the NBA, I think there's going to be a bit of a renaissance of post play, and I like that because the NBA has zero variety of play. There's just everyone plays the same style of basketball in the NBA, and they screen the ball over and over and over again, and they switch everything on defense, and that's part of the reason I like college basketball more, is because you just see so much more variety of play styles, and I hope that kind of happens in the NBA with some big guys getting in. If a team tries to like New Orleans running out Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins, and I hope we see more teams that just play different just to do it. So I might for that reason I'm looking forward to the draft.
Yeah, the scary thing about Williams too is he's still raw. I mean, he's still learning the game. He put on a lot of strength this offseason. He looks a lot bigger to me. He averaged 12, 8, and almost 3 blocks a game last year, and he really was still figuring things out for himself. So, I mean, let's see how he does this year. If he has a huge year, he could definitely slip up into that top 5.
Which is cool, because there's going to be a team that's, before the lottery might be thinking to themselves, man, we really need that key big man. Let's maybe we'll get a chance at Bagley, and they might fall to, like you said, they might fall just behind the pack and end up with Williams and still be very, very happy. So, they're in good shape. Some team's going to be really happy to get him, because he might fly a little bit under the radar with so many big men. You could even say Mo Bamba might slip ahead of him just because of the kind of perceived upside, and someone might get real lucky with Williams.
Watching Bamba early on, I mean, he can't score the basketball yet. I mean, he's clueless on the offensive end.
Yeah, he's going to be one of those guys. It's always funny because, there's most NBA fans, I would say, are not college basketball fans. So it's
Right.
always funny on draft day when it comes to like some of these big men getting drafted. And then, right across the screen on TV shows their college stat line. And it looks like, oh, this guy averaged like 6.9 points. And then, all the NBA fans are like, who's this guy? And I feel like that might be Mo Bamba by the end of the year where he gets drafted and he's, he might be like 9 points a game and, he'll get a lot of rebounds and blocks and that'll be impressive. Right. But, some fan of Phoenix or whoever gets him is going to be like, oh, this guy's trash because he's, we think that college basketball is, single A baseball and guys should be dominating offensively. But anyways, yeah, that'll be funny to see. I'm sure.
Definitely. We were talking about DeAndre Ayton, Arizona this year, off to a pretty terrible start. They lose 3 games in a row at the Battle for Atlantis. They lost to NC State, SMU, and Purdue. Things are just not clicking. But, as we talked about before, I'm not ready to jump off the bridge yet. This team to me is just too talented, too much talent to be this bad. They're playing without Raleigh Alkins right now. They're playing a lot of freshmen right now. We're still figuring things out. How worried are you about this Arizona team?
On a scale of 1 to 10, my worry would be like a 2 or a 3. Like, obviously, there is a little bit of a concern. Like, I mean, like, one of those losses is like, okay, well, it happens. 2 of those losses, it was almost like, oh, that's a little bit funny. But, a third loss when that third one came, especially for them to lose, I would say in 2 different ways. To lose 2 of those games where they couldn't really score the ball, and then to lose 1 game by not being able to defend at a high enough level. That was what took my concern at least to a bit of a level. It's one thing if a team, like if this team just struggled to score the basketball, like you said, they have so much talent to figure it out. But to see their defense also look really lost, it just shows a team that I think is just a little bit confused in their identity. And that's you mentioned too how many freshmen they're playing. It was kind of funny because, obviously I will also say, like, Arizona to me coming in, they were my number 1 team. I thought they were the best team in the nation. So, when I say people had them ranked highly, I do mean me. Don't get me wrong. But, I was thinking like, oh yeah, they're bringing so much back and so many veterans. But now just to look at their team and, they're obviously down Alkins, but even if he was in the roster, they're still relying, like, there's a lot of freshmen getting minutes. Like, pretty much their entire bench is freshman guys. And like you mentioned, it's earlier, I think like guys like that are going to take a little bit of time. They've got Acott playing, looks like 17.5 minutes a game, and Ira Lee's playing 14.8 minutes a game. And there's some guys like that. Totally. Yeah. There's that's not an insignificant amount, especially considering those are minutes in a lot of tight games and ultimately losses. So, one thing that's definitely interesting is I find Parker Jackson Cartwright to be the most interesting player on the team. And that was how a lot of people who kind of were shooting holes in Arizona in the offseason about why they weren't the number 1 team looked at him, who was unproven. And I kind of defended him, but so far he hasn't looked great. He looks like he's been okay. And I think that might just be, that not everyone just can continue to take big steps up until when they're a senior, and maybe his ceiling wasn't quite where guys like me honestly thought it was. But yeah, I see that you gestured when I said that, so I'll have to see what you think about him.
He's a solid to good player in my opinion. The physical part is the problem for him. He's very small. He gets pushed around a lot. He's a solid point guard. I mean, he averages 5 assists a game. He doesn't turn it over much, but he's not a big scorer. And again, I think the physical part of the game is a real problem for him. He tends to get injured a lot too.
Yeah.
So that's the concerning part for me. And their perimeter defense has been atrocious. They're giving up 40% from 3, which is, horrible. I mean, you're giving up 40% from 3 from your opponents. It's not very good. So, and they're just relying so much on Trier and Ayton. Trier and Ayton are both averaging 20 plus, and the next guy is averaging like 9 points a game. So they need more production from the other guys. But again, Alkins comes back. He's an all Pac-12 guy. These freshmen are going to get better. So that's why I'm not very concerned as much as some people.
Well, what's going to be so unfortunate for someone is like even if they were to go on from this point in the season and have something that was reminiscent of what most people would expect, only lose a couple games in conference. We'll say for the sake of this argument, they don't win the conference, but say they make it to the final game and they end up losing to USC. They might, because of these 3 losses, they might end up being like a 4 seed or something. And that's going to be a real horrible matchup for a team that wins their first game and in the second round has to face 4 seed Arizona and look like that's one of those things that always happens whenever a team that I think is really talented ends up losing a few games like that, is it ends up just being, and those are going to cost some seed lines to Arizona no matter what happens from this point. So some team is going to be like, are you kidding me? The 4 seeds are like, St. Mary's, Xavier, Texas A&M, and Arizona. Like, there's going to be something wild like that. But I'm looking now at KenPom, and they're giving up. Yeah, they're 259th in allowed 3-point percentage. So they're giving up a whole lot of threes, and go on.
You got to remember too, and I don't know, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but you got to remember too that the FBI investigation could be hovering over the team as well. So you never know how much that is an issue with what's going on.
Yeah, well, what I thought was really interesting is so I know Emmanuel Acott a little bit, and I was talking to him, and so again, he was supposed to be in next year's class, and he reclassified to play for this Arizona team. So it's kind of a whirlwind for him. He reclassified like 2 weeks before the FBI thing hit. So for him to go from reclassifying, thinks he's on, a consensus, we'll call it top 4 team. Then he finds out that he might be playing for a team that he thinks it might not be able to, there might be sanctions. He thinks they might not be able to play in the NCAA tournament. And, a lot of players were really close to that assistant coach who's now facing, a decade in federal prison. Like, that can't be easy. I can't even imagine what that's like. And who knows, Sean Miller might either consciously or subconsciously feel like maybe he might be involved in some way, because there might be a lot of assistant coaches singing right now. And like you mentioned, I while not being a conspiracy theorist, I am open to, I could see how that could potentially be in the back of their mind. And one of those things are not like, it might not be the biggest thing in their mind, but hey, when you lose 2 games in a row and you're thinking about that third game could be really tough. And hey, they ended up losing their third, like those things can kind of snowball on each other. So like you said, it could be something like that. It certainly doesn't help. That's for sure. We know that.
Of course. I mean, but again, there's a long way to go. So I wouldn't be shocked if this team, reels off 15 in a row and right back in the top 5 in a few weeks. So, all right, let's move on here. I wanted to talk about the SEC a little bit. They're off to a tremendous start. It's a conference that I've been talking up all off season. They have a bad reputation. The last few years, it's been really top heavy. And I've been trying to tell people this is a deep league. This is a very good conference this year. And I think they've been showing it out of the gate. Florida looks like one of the better teams in the country. Texas A&M is really impressive. Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Ole Miss. What do you think about the SEC so far?
I really like the SEC, and I think that like you were talking about, the strength is in its depth. A lot of people, as you get asked, people tweet this at you all the time. Rank the top 6 conferences, or they always ask. I see people asking you that on your chats. People ask me too, and it's obviously interesting because you can interpret that question in a lot of ways. You can say, hey, I think that this team has the strongest top 5, or you could look at it anyway. But I think that the SEC's strength is in their depth, and in the fact that the bottom third of their league, I think, is a lot better than any other team's bottom third or bottom corner. And we kind of saw that with, LSU is a basement team, but they were able to beat Michigan. And, they played Marquette pretty tough. Marquette's a really good team, and they just haven't embarrassed. LSU definitely hasn't embarrassed themselves. Obviously, like Tennessee was able to play to play Villanova pretty tough, and they beat NC State and they beat Purdue. So that's another team that a lot of people had in there. If you ask people how the bottom of the SEC would play out, Tennessee and LSU were at the bottom of a lot of them, and Tennessee is looking really good. And a lot of people have. I'm trying to think of the other teams most people at the bottom. South Carolina South Carolina has a weird thing where they just play the easiest non-conference schedules ever. So I still don't think they're very. I don't think they've lost yet. I think they're still undefeated, but I don't think they're playing anyone. Let me look it up. Oh, they have lost. Sorry, they lost to Illinois State. My apologies. Yeah. But yeah, they're looking at their non-conference. It looks like their most challenging non-conference team might be Temple, Temple or Clemson. So yeah, so yeah, South Carolina never plays really challenging non-conference. But anyways, that is where I think the strength. I don't think that the SEC has. If you were to take maybe their top 5 teams, I think the Big East is better. The ACC I probably think is better. Kentucky being not playing it at a super high level in my mind, obviously brings down the caliber of the top end of the SEC. But yeah, Florida, I like Florida where they're at, and Texas A&M I think is super good. And then I think there's a step down, but there's a lot of teams in that range of Ole Miss, and I think Vanderbilt's really good, and and Alabama obviously, and there's a pretty meaty middle.
Right. I think a great example is Tennessee was picked 13th preseason in the SEC, and you saw what they did in the battle for Atlanta. So they're a team I really like. They're scrappy. They're athletic. Grant Williams is an absolute stud. So, I see legitimately one bad team in this conference, and that's Georgia. I just don't think Georgia's very good.
So sorry, I have to just jump in really quick with my story. So I was able to write for the Lindy's preview this year, and I don't know if anyone got the Lindy's preview, but they had Georgia 19th in their preseason 25. But anyways, go. You were saying so. Yeah, you think there's one bad team, Georgia.
Everybody else, I think, can be pretty competitive. And they're not going to all make the NCAA tournament or anything, but it's not going to be an easy night when you play Vanderbilt. It's not going to be an easy night when you play a LSU, with a new coach and some pretty good talent. So, I think it's a really good conference. I think they could get maybe 7 or 8 NCAA bids. I really believe that.
Well, the way that they've played the non-conference so well has been key, because I think that's been the problem in I think the SEC has been better than people thought in the past couple of years, but they didn't get it done in non-conference. So right. What happened is, like you were talking about how tough it is to go into Memorial Gym at Vanderbilt and get a win these last couple of years. But if you don't get it done in non-conference and then you go and lose games to Vanderbilt in these last couple of years, it just looked like the SEC was beating each other up, and it made it look like nobody was good. So the fact that they've been able to get some of these marquee wins, Texas A&M with that big win over West Virginia to just kind of kick off the college basketball season. But yeah, like you said, I think that the SEC standings are going to be so tough to predict, because especially that kind of 4 to 8, 4 to 9, honestly, like 4 to 11 really is tough. But if all the metrics and all the conference RPI, and if that shows that the SEC is top 2 or top 3, they just will take 7 teams from the SEC kind of no matter what, and it's kind of shaping up like that's going to happen. And there's a lot more good quality non-conference games that to be played. The SEC has a lot of teams scheduled really aggressively, and I think part of that is because they knew it was a conference that they've been down this last couple of years, and they needed to get they knew they had some good teams and needed to make sure that there was kind of make no doubt on seeding day and selection day. But yeah, great conference. It's going to make for a lot of really competitive games, and I think they also play a style. The SEC has a style of play that is grit and grind. But that's kind of the style that works really well in the NCAA tournament. And did anyone think that South Carolina was the 4th best team in college basketball last season? No, not necessarily. But the way that they played is perfectly suited to the way that games are kind of played in March. So yeah, that's I think you might see some teams like that do well in the NCAA tournament again from the SEC.
Yeah, it's a really good conference. It's going to be really competitive. It's going to be tough. I said this in the SEC preview podcast I did with Blake Lovell. I don't think you're going to see the champion, at 16-2 or 17-1. I think they're going to lose 4 or 5 games, because I think it's just such a darn competitive league.
Oh yeah, like you said, some team as much as I just said, I'm not really a fan of Georgia. If Yonte Maton goes off and has himself a night and ends up beating Florida at home, like that. Well, that's not the most shocking thing in the world. And I love that. Hey, like that's I would love if the team that won the SEC had 5 losses. That would be really cool. And I would love if the team that came last had 5 or 6 wins, or I don't even know, something like that, where it's not just like, hey, here's the top teams, here's like the middle teams with a couple of them fighting for an NCAA tournament, and here's just kind of the trash. There's and yeah, going back to one thing that I think is really cool about the SEC too is and it has roots in the fact that these teams have football money, but it means that they're going to get the best facilities, and it means that they're going to have be able to get the best facilities, and that means they can get the best coaches. And also, all SEC teams are located in kind of rich recruiting grounds. That's the thing about being in the Southeast. Every single state has really good in-state recruiting opportunities. So you have football money to get good quality coaching, and every team has in-state talent. So the SEC has been down these last couple of years, but it's always going to be a tough conference to keep down for that reason. Because when you have money for coaches and you have in-state talent to recruit, that's a pretty good recipe for success. So it's almost embarrassing that the SEC allowed itself to get to the point of being a 3-bid league a couple of years back. Like that, like truly, that is embarrassing. But now that they've kind of bounced back, I think they're going to be consistent.
Yeah, and I think something that doesn't get talked about enough is the level of coaching in this league. John Calipari, Mike White, Ben Howland, Quanzo Martin, Bruce Pearl. There's so many good coaches in this league. Rick Barnes. I mean, there's a ton of them.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Quanzo Martin. Like that's like if you look at what were the worst teams in the SEC, you look at who their coaches are now. It's like Quanzo Martin, which I know he has his critics, but like for a team that was in the basement, if you're going to get him, like that's a good get. And then Will Wade at LSU. Like there's just
Love Will Wade.
Totally. And I love Andy Kennedy. There's good coaching all through. And again, as much as some people don't like to admit it, it's a little bit of a money thing, but the SEC has money because the SEC has football, and that means they're always going to be able to attract. There's it's a conference that every conference has coaches that people think are on the hot seats, and I think that the SEC coaches should all be pretty secure where they're at. But if there were to be, if some coaches were to get fired or move on to other jobs, I think that they would be filled very capably all around. So yeah, that is you were talking about the coaching caliber, and yeah, it's quite high in that league.
Absolutely. So before we got a lot more to talk about tonight, but I wanted to talk to you about the NBA draft and the one and done rule. I don't like it. I don't think a lot of people like it. To me, I think if you're 18 years old and you think you're good enough to play in the pros, then you should be able to. And I think it's a terrible, thing that they have to go play at college for 1 year if they don't want to. So what would you do to change it? And do you think it should be changed?
Do I think it should be changed is an interesting question, because this is my kind of unpopular opinion that I have to share, and I think you'll be pretty receptive to it. But people talk about the NBA not allowing guys to come out of high school, or they talk about college basketball only allows amateurs and doesn't allow people. My opinion is these are businesses, and they can do whatever they want. And if you don't want to participate in what they're doing, you don't have to, because no one has a gun to your head. So, if the NBA decides they don't want players that young, then players can go play in Europe if they want. If they don't want to play college basketball, they can go play elsewhere. And so talking about what what they should do is always kind of weird, because I think they can kind of do it. So when I hear like what I think they should do, I just have to take a look at it from like kind of like a business standpoint. And if I'm the NBA, I want to allow 18-year-old players out of high school to play in the NBA, because if you're the NBA, why do you want a college team getting a year of their likeness? Even look at the nowadays, people know who the top high school players are, and like the only thing that the one and done rule is allowing is for teams like a Duke or a Kentucky or others, of course, to make some money off their kids' names. So if you're Adam Silver in the NBA and everyone knows who LaMelo Ball is, why not get him in an NBA uniform and let him make you money, not make UCLA money? So that's something that that I think they should do just business wise. And also, if you were to ask just my personal opinion, yeah, I totally think high school players should be like, I don't think there should be, if you really ask me, if a 17-year-old thing is good enough and to play, like give them the chance, there shouldn't really be any restrictions. So that is kind of my thought is like, hey, if you're ready to play NBA basketball, the NBA should be in their best interest to let you in and give you that kind of rule. I don't really like the idea of the modified baseball rule where the NBA will say like, if you come right out of high school, you either have to come right out of high school or you have to wait 2 years.
3 years.
I feel like
Actually,
it's or yeah, well, sorry, 3 years is the baseball rule. A lot of people were talking about 2 years. I know we're obviously, but if there was I guess I should say any variation of that baseball, whether it's 2 years or it's 3 years like baseball or whatever that is, I don't like the idea of that too, because I feel like it's just it's still just kind of restricting players where I feel like players should be able to make their own thing. What do you feel?
Well, the thing is, I kind of like that rule, the 3-year rule. I think you should be able to come out of high school and go to the NBA, yes. But I think if you go to college, I don't think it would be a bad thing if they made you stick around for 2 or 3 years, because I always revert back to the NBA Summer League, Eric, and I watch the NBA Summer League, and it's just riddled with bad decisions with kids who came out of high. It is. I mean,
Yeah.
how many kids do you see in the Summer League where they came out way too early, and now they're just almost out of basketball. They're barely making a roster. And I feel like development wise, it's good for a kid to stick around college for 2 or 3 years. Now, will it ever happen? I'm not sure, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I actually kind of like it. And I think it will help with the kid's development and it'll maybe prolong his NBA career instead of coming out too early, playing for 2 or 3 years, and then you're out of the league, if you know what I'm talking about.
Right. I guess it's kind of just it depends on, I guess, how you feel just about what role does the NBA play or college play in deciding what's best for a player as opposed to just letting him decide what's best for him. Because yeah, if you let him go out whenever he wanted, then it just totally puts it on the player to decide when he's ready and when he feels or how he feels is the best way to develop his talent. If he decides, yeah, going to the NBA right away or trying to go to the NBA right away and probably ending up in the G League is the best for my development, then like, hey, go ahead and do that. If there's a player that's like, oh no, like I think the best coaches are in college basketball and I can practice a lot more and get right there So I guess that's kind of my thing is I just don't know if I think that the system should be responsible for deciding what's best for the player's development. I kind of think it should be the player deciding what's best for his development. And if he thinks that staying in college for 3 or maybe even 4 years or maybe 5 years with a red shirt is in his best interest, then that's cool. And if he thinks playing for, the Raptors 905 and, or, all those, the Orlando Blue is in front of, 0 fans getting streamed live on YouTube in the G League, if that's what he thinks is best for his development, there is part of me that's just like, yeah, that's kind of your prerogative. You as a player should decide what's better. And I also just wonder if there's a player who, like, look at D'Angelo Russell, a guy that before his season at Ohio State, no one would have pegged him as a one and done player, but obviously he ended up being like a number 2 pick. So like, what would happen with a guy like that if say the rule was even you had to be 2 years removed from high school. So he goes to Ohio State, should be a number 2 pick, and then isn't allowed to go to the NBA. Like, yeah. I'd be interested to see what would happen there. Would he kind of gladly accept his role, and would he, be a Miles Bridges and be like, oh, sweet, like I'm happy to come back? Would he try to go to Europe and make money for another year or for a year before go to the NBA? It would have been interesting to see, but I guess I'm kind of all for the free market of players just deciding when is best for them.
It's tough. I know it's tough because sometimes staying in college helps players and sometimes it hurts you, draft wise. So, you have a great freshman year, you don't come out, you come back, you have a sophomore year, and you, instead of going in the top 10, you're drafted at 23 or 24. So
I need to find. Oh, I was just looking at this article. I think it might have been written by Ken Pomeroy, but it might have been someone else. But anyways, it was looking at all the kind of high school draft picks from when you were allowed to draft guys out of there, and it was kind of showing how how effective it was, like how many guys that were drafted, quote unquote, early out of high school, actually panned out and to be great. But that doesn't account for, I write for Florida, so I have to talk Florida. If you could have been drafted right out of high school, Chris Walker would have been drafted right out of high school. If you could get drafted right out of high school, Casey Hill would have been drafted right out of high school. And, those guys, Chris Walker had not very good college careers and have not been able to make splashes in the NBA. And now Casey Hill had, an up and down college career and is now playing in Hungary. And I suppose one could argue that's a development problem that the University of Florida had. You could argue that. That's fair. But yeah, it's just interesting because there was an article that was defending like, hey, actually drafting guys from high school is, that worked and would work. And a lot of people also point to like, if you look at like, all the like USA Basketball and Nike Hoop Summit, if you look at the players that they kind of peg at 15 to be the top guys, a lot of them do go to the NBA and are successful ultimately. So you could say, those would be the guys that would be drafted out of high school. But then, yeah, I look at the guys that were, kind of forced to go to college, like a Chris Walker, and it's like, I don't know if those guys would have came right out of high school. Like, yeah. I think if they would have fizzled out, but
I don't know. I think you can make an argument both ways. Like you said, there's been a ton of great high school players who have come into the NBA and done well, and there's also a slew of college players who left, after their freshman year and are out of basketball now. So, and they should have stayed. So,
totally, yeah. Yeah, we were talking Arizona before. Kobe Simmons is a guy that probably declared. Right. Well, some people would say declared early. Maybe he just knew he wasn't going to be drafted high or drafted and wanted to live the D-League lifestyle as opposed to the Arizona lifestyle. But yeah, I'll be watching guys like that just to see how their NBA careers unfold, just to see different paths. But yeah, it's going to be talked about until they change the rule, and then it'll be talked about after they change the rule. So I look forward to it, though.
It'll never be perfect, the process. So we'll see what happens. But so let's talk about the Florida Duke game tonight. I'm sure you're excited about that. The Gators looked great the other night against Gonzaga. What's your main concern with the game tonight? What do you think is going to happen? The main thing for me is who's going to guard Marvin Bagley, because Jonathan Williams absolutely destroyed the Gators front court the other night. He had 39 and 12. Who handles Bagley on this Florida roster? Nobody handles him. That is the problem. They have zero options with John Egbunu injured. He would have been the guy. Obviously, he's a monster. He would have. I actually like to be like, just as a basketball fan, I guess I would have loved to have seen that matchup. A fifth-year center who's got the size to hang with Bagley versus obviously kind of the talent and skill set of Bagley. I would have loved to see Egbunu take him on, but obviously Egbunu is going to be out till conference season. So yeah, with that, so if we back it up, the first game of the PKD against Stanford, Kavarius Hayes, who's been starting at center, he was suspended for a violation of team rules. And then so they started Keith Stone, 6'8", 230 at the 5. Igor Kulikov, 6'5" and 200 pounds at the 4. And then and then Kavarius Hayes was playing against Gonzaga, but they didn't start him and they didn't play him as many minutes. So they played extremely small. But so even then, Kavarius Hayes is their starting center, even though he hasn't started the PK80. But yeah, he's 6'9" and maybe 210. He's a really good defender, but not like, he can guard in space. He's long. He can, but when you're guarding Bagley, you need the straight up strength. And off the bench they have a sophomore in Gorjak who's really raw, really raw. Other front court options, they just don't have them to stop Bagley. So, right. Williams torched them from Gonzaga, and it was beautiful to watch. He plays great basketball, and the sets that they had drawn up to get post isolations and allow Williams to finish with both hands. Oh man, he is a special player. But anyways, you hit the nail on the head right there. That is the biggest concern for Florida. Florida's played a lot of 1-3-1 zone. Not a lot, but that's been kind of their different defensive look has been to play 1-3-1. I wonder if they're going to do that just to kind of create mayhem and try to get steals, because right. I think they know that there's just no, if they play straight man and shots go up, they aren't going to be able to rebound at a high level. Right. So I'll be interested if I maybe see some 1-3-1 from Florida just to
see if they can keep the ball out of Bagley's hands a little bit. But yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. Bagley is going to be a problem.
I like Kavaris Hayes. I like Keith Stone, but they're role players, and they're not going to be able to hang with a guy like Bagley, in my opinion. Even as good a defender I think Hayes is, I just think Bagley is going to be a major problem tonight. So I think you're right. I mean, they'll probably use that zone quite a bit tonight. Would you think that as well?
Quite a bit, I would say. Not, I would say maybe like 20%. 25 is my prediction. I think that they'll play 1-3-1. The other problem is in man, they really like to switch a ton. So you saw that against Williams. Not only did you have Keith Stone getting cooked, but he gets switched on to Kayvon Allen, and you'd have a shooting guard trying to guard him in the post. And that's the thing about switching, is if you play a team as smart as Gonzaga that knows how to exploit those, or Duke as well, it's tough. And yeah, you mentioned Kavaris Hayes. He's a great team defender and a great help side defender. But I guess that's what I was trying to hint at before. He's a great help side defender, great team defender, but and 210 pounds, that's just not going to get the job done one-on-one against a guy like Bagley. And it's going to be a little bit frustrating, I think, for Florida, because Florida plays it's pretty hard defense, but there's going to be times they're going to defend for 28 seconds of the shot clock. Tough contested shots going to go up, and Bagley's just going to consume it and get a layup, and those are real deflating buckets to give up.
Yeah,
so yeah,
I'm concerned. I'm interested to see how banged up Chiosa is. I know he's been dealing with some injuries, and he did play phenomenal the other night, but that was a double overtime game. I'm maybe Florida's a little bit tired from that game. Obviously, that was such a tremendous basketball game. I would have been dead on the floor after playing a game like that. But so what's your prediction for tonight? Who do you think wins?
It's got to be Duke. Florida also relies. Gonzaga should have won the other night. Absolutely, Gonzaga played a better basketball game. Florida just has more shot makers, and Jalen Hudson was ridiculous. So, Florida has more shot makers, and that won them the game against Gonzaga. But I think that they're just going to get pounded on the inside by Duke, and they're going to have no option. And I think it's gonna be a high scoring game. I would say, I think Duke's going to win 88 to not super high scoring, I guess, but I'll say 88-80 for Duke. I think that one of those guys like Kulichov, who's really didn't score the ball at all against Gonzaga, or Jalen Hudson, who is absurd against Gonzaga, or Kayvon Allen, who's kind of had a measured start to the year. I think that they're going to have enough shot makers to keep the game closer than it's going to feel like Duke's dominating. Florida's going to have enough shot makers to keep them in the game. But I think it's going to be kind of a wire-to-wire Blue Devil show tonight.
Yeah, you can't forget about Wendell Carter, too. He's going to be a problem inside as well.
Yeah, I forgot mentioning him. I think I was just because I think he's at like 9.4 rebounds a game or something. Grayson Allen could miss every shot tonight, and it might be the best offense for Duke, because there's going to be guys just putting it back and getting Florida in foul trouble. So, those Florida wings are awesome, but man, there's going to be like Jalen Hudson's going to have to go 8 for 12 from the 3-point line again, or something like that.
Hudson is tremendous as Hudson was the other night. He's not that level of player on a consistent basis. I mean, I can see Allen doing something like that a lot, but I don't think Hudson's that good.
Well, they're talking about on the broadcast too, just the way that like Hudson shoots the ball, and it comes out with topspin sometimes. It's crazy. Like he's one like, but yeah, he is just he's a J.R. Smith type man. He takes some tough shots when he just relies so much on feel. He's no two jump shots look the same from him form wise. Sometimes he shoots the ball a little bit higher, a little bit more from behind his head. He looks at he's a very much a feel guy, and when he's on, my goodness, it's special, because there was a hand in his face for every one of his 8 makes against Gonzaga.
I mean, he took 6 or 7 shots, and I'm like, what the hell is he doing? And it just then it went in. I said, oh, okay, there you go.
Oh no, yeah, I was listening to an interview afterwards with Mark Few, and Mark Few was just like, Mark Few was just kind of exasperated thinking about the shot, because, like I said, Gonzaga should have won that game. They had so many times to close it, and there's even a weird play like Gonzaga started to run away with it kind of late in the second half, and Florida had this 5-point play where Hudson hit this ridiculous turnaround three with like 20 seconds left in the shot clock that he didn't need to put up. And at the same time, Kavarius Hayes just kind of caught an elbow to the face from a guy that's trying to box him out. And they called the foul and he went to the free throw line. And that big 3 and 2 free throws, it was like kind of the college 5-point play, and it kind of got Florida back in it. And there was just, you could Gonzaga probably should be playing in this game against Duke, but this is a good Florida team. I'm not trying to trash on Florida, but it's in the context of that game. And also I'll say too, that was a Gonzaga home crowd. Like that was a home game for Gonzaga. Their crowd is incredible. Those Bulldogs fans are great. So they made that tough on Florida, and that's a valuable experience for Florida. But
I just feel like Florida is just absolutely relentless. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with Mike White and the coach he is, but they are just absolutely relentless. They just do not stop coming at you. You know, they're not the most talented team I've ever seen, but you know, you guys got guys like shooting like Hudson and Allen and Chioza. I mean, you can beat anybody on any night. So
really we have seen, like, you know, Kulikov, who was like a 47 point something 3-point shooter at Rice before transferring over, and he was 6 for 9 in the opener. He had nothing going against Gonzaga, and part of that, and this actually goes to the size thing as well. This is another storyline for tonight, as Duke has been playing more zone, and Gonzaga zoned Florida, and it was actually super effective. And part of it was because Florida doesn't have a post they can get the ball to in the high post to kind of pick apart the zone. So they had Kulichov playing that high post and trying to get the ball into a 6'5" guy to run your offense. That is tough. And he had a really tough time. So that's another thing I expect I expect Duke to play a lot of zone. And, Florida was able, Hudson kind of shot their way out of the zone, and Gonzaga had to go away from it with his just like contested 3-point shooting.
Yeah.
But I expect to see zone from Duke. And if the shots aren't falling, could be a tough one, but just because of the size thing. But when Igbunu gets back, it's going to change things a lot for Florida, because right now they are undersized.
Yeah, the only like concern I have with Duke right now, they have no depth. Like their top 5 guys do everything for them, and at some point you need somebody else to step up. Some role players. So that would be my only really factor. But I would probably lean Duke a little bit. But I just think Florida is so darn good and relentless that they'll keep themselves in this game. I think it'll come down to the wire for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you like to talk too about the way that they're calling fouls in college basketball. And Florida's really, really tough to guard in space. Like, if they put out Chioza, who's a blur, and Kayvon Allen and Jalen Hudson, and then, Kulichov at the 4, that they're really hard to guard in space. And if there's, a college basketball ref who wants to be that guy, Grayson Allen could pick up 2 touch fouls early, because, Hudson's a tough cover. So there is some things like that could turn the game quickly in Florida's favor. And that is actually, I like Florida's perimeter. I do like it more than Duke's. So, and that does win you, a lot of games in college basketball, having the better backcourt and the better perimeter. But just I feel like their guards maybe are just a little bit better than Duke's, but I feel like Duke's front court is several steps above Florida's, and that's, if it's going to be several steps of difference, then that's a big advantage.
Yeah, the PK80 tournament especially was just littered with fouls. I mean, I think I did the numbers. There was like 575 fouls, and so it was like an average of like almost 42 a game, which is just too much.
Yeah, well, we watch college basketball because we love to see the players, and especially in college basketball, usually there's just a few players you really like on a team, and if people are gonna buy tickets to a Michigan State game because they want to see Bridges, and he gets 2 touch fouls called on him in 4 minutes, that's going to make people a little bit upset. So, I think it is a problem. Absolutely. And you pointed it out well.
The off the ball fouls are really frustrating too. They, aren't involved in the play. A lot of those fouls don't need to be called. And it ruins the flow of the game.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where I guess this is totally my preference, I guess. And I don't want to see it like football out there, but yeah, if a guy cuts off the ball, and he runs right at you trying to cut through the ball, and back in the day you used to chuck that cutter and put your shoulder into him because that's your space in the paint, and now they call that every single time. And I just feel like there's a few rules like that, or like you said, talking about touch fouls on the perimeter. It's just like, I feel like there's some people like, I like defensive basketball where you need to run good offense to beat good defense, not you need to just continually screen the ball and try to get running downhill because they'll call fouls a lot of the time. And I feel like there's just people in college basketball who want two teams in the hundreds every game. And I think that there needs to be a little bit of space for guys to battle on the perimeter and have to work for their shots. And yeah.
And people say to me, well, it all averages out in the end. And I say, yeah, sure, it does. But it's still not a good thing when there's 55 fouls called in a basketball game, or 45 or 48 or 50. I mean, 40 is too much. So I just think it just ruins the pace of the game. It ruins the flow of the game. And I just like to see them stay away from some of the petty fouls.
Well, we saw that the extreme example was, of course, the national championship game last year. I forget how many fouls there were. I know people were talking about the number, but that was college basketball's time to really shine in front of a lot of people who might not normally watch the sport, and it just wasn't a great game because of the lack of flow and the lack of pace, and that was disappointing as people who were watching college basketball for maybe the second or third time in the year were just like, oh man, that game was kind of ugly. So that was an extreme example of the officiating issues, I guess, at least in my opinion. And
yeah. So hopefully they fix it, but I doubt it. All right. So last thing before we get out of here, Eric, I thought it'd be fun, put together our top 10s. I know there's not a big sample size, but who are your top 10 teams that you've been most impressed with this season so far?
Okay. So, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm just going to go for a little bit of a starting point. I'm just going to go look at the last AP poll. So just as a little bit of a starting point gets from there. So, definitely Duke belongs there. I think Kansas belongs there. Michigan State definitely belongs there. Villanova, Wichita State, Florida. I think I'll drop Kentucky out of 10 just for now, at least, like you talked about the sample size. This might be unpopular, but I just don't think North Carolina quite yet. I still am going to take North Carolina out.
Okay.
So I think those will be two teams I'll take out of the current AP top 10 would be Arizona and North Carolina. I also say, like, I do think Arizona's still, like, Arizona could lose two more games and I'd probably still say, I still think that they're a top 10 team, but after this performance, I'll drop them out. Two teams that I think should be in the top 10. We've already discussed both of them, but I think Texas A&M is a top 10 team.
Me too.
And I think Gonzaga is a top 10 team. Maybe I'm just biased after watching that game and seeing them kind of cook Florida in a lot of ways. I see, Notre Dame, Minnesota, those would be definitely in the conversation, but I think I'd still like Texas A&M and Gonzaga a little bit more. Purdue got that loss. I'm higher on Purdue than most people, but they took a bad loss. I think that would be it. Cincinnati hasn't quite had the games yet. The schedule yet. They take on Florida in a little bit. I'm super excited for that. That's gonna be a good matchup. Same as USC, Miami. I'm lower on Miami probably than the average person. They're still a great team, of course. But yeah. So if you take Duke, Kansas, Michigan State, Villanova, Wichita State, Florida, USC. I guess I dropped three teams out because I'm taking Kentucky, North Carolina, and Arizona out. So I'll put Minnesota in there. So I'll say Minnesota, Texas A&M, and Gonzaga are the three teams that aren't in the top 10 that I think should be.
Yeah, you better keep Trojan Fury in there, Eric. That's all I have to say.
Oh yes, and and St. Bonaventure, of course, who've suffered some unfortunate losses, but
they've been tremendous this season. Tremendous.
What about you? What are your top 10?
Well, it's hard to put even a top 25 together this early, but I think Duke has clearly been the best team in the country. I think Villanova has to be in there as well. Florida, Kansas. I actually like North Carolina. I was concerned about North Carolina going into the season after they pretty much lost their whole front court, but what I've seen from them at the PK 80, I think Luke May looks like one of the best players in the country. So I'm going to keep, how good has he been?
He's been awesome. And it's hard not to cheer for a guy who doesn't have the physical gifts of a Mo Bamba, but is having kind of similar effectiveness, obviously in very different ways. But that North Carolina Michigan State game is going to be obviously if North Carolina were to win that one, then I'll look like a fool by the time a lot of people listen to this podcast, because that'll obviously solidify them as a top 10. And I mean, obviously, if you lose to Michigan State, that doesn't reflect poorly on them in any fashion. So
no, I still have Michigan State in the top 10 as well.
Totally.
An early loss to Duke isn't going to knock you out too bad. I agree with you. I think and I've talked about Texas A&M all off season. I think this team is tremendous, and they don't even have J.J. Caldwell yet, who's probably their best point guard. So I mean, that's a scary thing. He hasn't played yet because he's been suspended. I think he's playing tonight against USC. So that should be a really, really good game. I have Minnesota creeped up in that top 10. They've really impressed me. I know that whole situation yesterday was just weird. I know that Alabama somehow kept it close 3-on-5, but I mean that whole situation was just a cluster. So I'm not going to take anything away from Minnesota because Alabama kept the game close. And then
yes. Their 3-on-5 defense is poor. That won't go deep in the tournament.
And then the last two, I said Baylor. I might be crazy, but I love this Baylor team. I really do. I think they could, at least be in the conversation for top, 10 or 15. And then I'm going to keep USC in the top 10. I know they haven't played a ton of great competition, but they haven't lost yet. So I'm going to keep Trojan Fury in that top 10. I have to, because of who they are.
Yeah, that's they're fun, and they have that kind of versatility and athleticism that's is going to be tough for a lot of teams. It's tough for they're not going to lose to any mediocre teams because it's tough to do that when you just kind of overwhelm with athleticism.
And they're one of the deepest teams in the country. And I love when people say depth is overrated. No, it's not. Wouldn't you want to have more good players? I mean, I never get that argument.
Just going back, I actually totally missed this myself. But Caldwell he actually played against Pepperdine the other day.
Oh, he did? Okay.
I totally missed that, to be honest. Sorry, folks.
Me
but
too.
it was he was able to play. They took him in off the bench, so it's probably still their quasi suspension to kind of take him off the bench.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would say that probably means that he is certainly going to be playing, which is great because I'm excited to see him play. Because the fact that we talked about it before, when you have big guys, sometimes they kind of need a guard to kind of stir the drink, get them the ball where they need it, and he could be that guy for some guys that have been pretty effective in his absence.
Yeah, and a few other teams. Just Gonzaga has been really impressive to me. I think. I had them pegged as maybe a right outside the top 25 team, still an NCAA tournament team, but they've been really impressive. So I think they have to be in the conversation. Obviously, Notre Dame as well. They beat a really good Wichita State team. Granted, Wichita State's playing without Marcus McDuffie right now, so you're not going to see the best that they have until he comes back. So, but yeah, I mean, a lot of good teams, a lot of good games early this season. At my last podcast last week, it was kind of an underwhelming first week. But this last week with all the great tournaments, it's really picked up.
Yeah, that is kind of one of the unfortunate parts about the way that the way that kind of the NCAA selection process and seeding process has taken place has made the impact it's had on scheduling has teams are pretty reluctant to play a lot of good games unless they're these kind of neutral site tournaments. So there's some give and take there because it kind of sucks that, like you said, that first week of the season. There's not many good games, but then it makes these tournaments particularly awesome because teams want to be playing in them, and you get tournament slates like we've had. So, ultimately, I do think that teams being reluctant to play good teams on the road or play good quality mid majors ever, or power conference teams never want to play good mid majors ever. I do think it's bad for college basketball, but the good side, the one good part that comes from that is these all the good teams wanting to stack up in tournaments on neutral sites for that kind of boost to the metrics.
I mean, St. Mary's to me is the perfect example because they play Cupcake City every preseason, every non-conference, and then they win 28 games, but they don't beat anybody because the WCC is so poor. So and they're in big trouble now because they lost to Washington State the other day. And now, they don't get to play San Diego State in that final and pick up a quality win. So, it's they might be in trouble. They might have to beat Gonzaga at least once or twice in their conference season.
Yeah, it's well, the other thing too is I assume also teams are now probably scared to play St. Mary's. Like that's kind of an example of a team I don't think that a lot of people would want to face if
Eric, they're not leaving the state of California until conference play. I mean,
really?
That's not, yeah, no, they're
wow.
like 90% of their games are like within a couple hundred miles of where their school is, and they had an opportunity to play Grand Canyon, and they had an opportunity to play Nevada, and they both bolted on both those opportunities because they didn't want to go on the road.
That's crazy. One thing I thought was interesting going to schedule, people might not care about this, but I find it interesting, but it's kind of the way that, major conference teams are also squeezing out mid-majors. The SEC has now started to I've seen it in the SEC now and I was talking to one of the coaches about it, was how there's now these no team wants to play like a really trash, number 277 Ken Palm team that's going to really tank them. But no team wants to play good enough mid-majors that might steal a win from them. So now the SEC has started to get these mid-majors and get them on kind of schedule to play a ton of SEC teams. So, for example, North Florida, who had some good runs. But yeah, they played Florida, and then they're also playing Missouri, and they're playing LSU and playing Mississippi State. And that way it's still a team that no one's scared about, but the SEC all banding together to be like, hey, if we all make sure to play the same common opponent, at least we know that their RPI isn't going to kill us. And it's clever, of course. It is clever. I get why they do it. But it's also sad that's if you wanted this game to not be, an RPI burden, then instead of playing a 299th RPI team, go play a 150 team, but it's interesting.
You hit the nail on the head. When mid-major fans complain to me that they can't, their teams can't get scheduling, I say, well, I understand why you're upset, but I get why these power teams do it. They're not going to take the risk. Why would they if they have to? If they don't have to.
Yeah, I if I was, you can always play the game of if I was college basketball commissioner, what would you change? This is probably a bad idea, but I'm gonna just because whatever. If I was a college basketball, I would force teams to play even just one road non-conference game. That would I would say that's wouldn't be to me too big of an ask. Just hey, just play one more. You just have to play one non-conference road game against the Division I opponent on the road, and it would be kind of cool because maybe Arkansas goes to Morehead State, and those fans get to experience a game like that. I'm not saying you have to go play, Indiana State, or you don't have to go play UT Arlington or a team that you're maybe scared of. You can go play whatever team you want, but just do it. And then I think it might be teams might do. So that would be one of the things I would change if I was college basketball. I know that would never happen.
That's not a bad idea, but there's too much money involved, and teams aren't going to take the risk and ruin their resume. So hopefully it gets better in the future. But that's going to wrap it up tonight, guys. I really appreciate Eric coming on. Eric will definitely, I'm sure we'll have Eric back later on this season for another recap. It was a lot of fun. Eric, I really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I look forward to talking again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the basketball games tonight because there's some great ones.
Yeah, and just share your Twitter handle for us, Eric, so everybody knows.
eFawcett7, EFAWCETT7. Always love talking hoops there.
Yeah, and definitely check out Eric on GatorCountry.com. A lot of good stuff. So, Eric, thanks a lot, man. We'll talk to you later.
Hey, thanks so much. Take care.
All right, guys, we'll be back next Sunday about around the same time. We'll have our third weekly recap, and I'll have another guest on, so we'll talk to you later. Tony Patelis, College Hoop News. Thanks.